Processes and systems, chapter 7 is where we start our discussion today. And when we look at processes and systems, it's important to understand that they are part of the fabric from a marketing standpoint and even a marketing planning standpoint. So, what are these components? Information governance, business process management, critical thinking, fact gathering, and of course Kaizen. So we'll go into detail on each one of these. When we look at a process, let's use this example for a student going to school. And so in the first step of a process, the student goes to school, they attend classes or courses, they study and complete homework, and then they acquire a knowledge and there's a grade that's assessed to them. So that's a simple four-step process and an example of how a process might work. Now, let's continue with that same example for a student. And let's look at them from a system standpoint. Having a successful student means that also you have a system in place that has quality content. It has managers and administrative support personnel for the entire organization. There's a healthiness about that organization that allows it to thrive. There's a personal commitment from the student to learn, transportation to get from point A to B, a student learning set of tools in a toolkit that helps them progress personally, and then instructors that are there to help them with particular teaching tools that are beneficial. Functional facilities to make sure that they can get the type of support they need. And then last but not least, the person has to be strong enough to work their way through and into the system. So in this case, this is an example of how we might define a system for that same successful student. Now, when we look at governance, understand that there are roles that we've alluded to. These roles define responsibility and they fill tasks for positions in the organization. And there are also processes within the information and governance side of processes and systems. So there's a string of activities designed to meet the goals, and part of this constructive information management. Controls are in place to make sure we have monitoring and that we're managing conflict from a way that helps us build positive relationships. And then in order to make sure that we are measuring what we're doing, the metrics are extremely important because they look at the comparison of actual output to goal attainment. The business process management, though, is about definition and how we define the models for success, the resources needed, and the expectations that are given in order to help us better implement, because we need to be able to approach or have different approaches to analyze, design, and support the workflow in the marketplace. Managing is important because we develop and exchange communication and we want to create these successful workflow pathways as well as refinement. And refinement is about retooling, looking at things from a perspective that allows us to encourage critical assessment and determine whether or not we need to retool overall. Now, this leads us into critical thinking. So when we talk about critical thinking, we're going to oversimplify it a little bit, but there's an approach to understanding critical thinking. It allows us to be open-minded, predictably sequential, but at the same time, the content can be unpredictable or a little bit unsettling or stable in regard to that, because you're talking about developing a skill. So you create a pathway for this that you allow the testing of conclusions as well as incorporating thought and having an openness to that, providing opportunities, and then consistently evolving in the process. Now, as a result of that, if we're able to critically or plant the seeds for critical thinking, the results are we start to mitigate bias. We really put ourselves in a position to cultivate a pattern for logic. And logic is important when we're defining critical thinking. We can reassess some of our outcomes as well as expose some assumptions that probably don't need to be or can be whittled down within our results. We can challenge our resolution. We provide an environment that really is inclusive from a communication structure perspective. And then last but not least, there is constant improvement in what we do. So that helps us put that structure around critical thinking. And of course, you can always do a little more research here in order to further develop your critical thinking skills. Now, when we're looking at fact gathering, specifically fact gathering for decision making as a function of research, it's important to understand that there's a framework here. We have to identify the challenge, We have to have a statement of need. We look for need analysis. There's a query into the solution decision process, and then the solutions are considered. So let's take a different example and look at office space. So in the identity challenge, or to identify the challenge, we've outgrown our office space. The statement of need is that we need more space. The need analysis is that we implement fact gathering, and then the query is all these questions about the space, how it's used, what are the risks, what are the tools, what are the maintenance. That then helps us formulate some solutions that we consider to ultimately make a decision. Now, when we look at Kaizen, which is nothing more than defining things by change for the betterment that is constant improvement. So we're looking for these small steps to continually improve. And we do so through our personal experience. And we go on this fact finding to make sure that we experience it. Not that we read it, not that we saw it, but we actually experienced it. So there are 5 S's that we have to cover in Kaizen: the organization, the orderliness, the cleanliness, the standards, and the discipline are always important when we're trying to get improvement from our personal experiences that is consistent for change for the better in our organization. So here are some definitions that should be helpful for you and at least allow you to start to look at processes and systems a little differently prior to taking this particular lesson. And I think what's most significant here is that these processes and systems in our management and in our marketing world are constant. They're always there. So it's better for you to become a student of process and systems and understand how they operate than it is to become a spectator of processes and systems. So information governance, business process management, critical thinking, fact gathering, and Kaizen. So what did we learn? We learned that we have differences between processes and systems, but then a process can operate within a system. We understand that critical thinking is important for information gathering, but we need further fact gathering in order to make a decision. And we learned that we need to take incremental steps toward improvement, but all of this can be part of the business process management. So there's an exchange and an interaction amongst these 5 elements. Here is your thought for the day. Stay motivated.